Howdy lads! As humans continue doing human things like making the entire ocean more acidic, hundreds of species go extinct every year as a result. But every once in a while, one species will manage to just barely avoid the Reaper's firm grasp. So today, I want to talk to you about some of the most interesting stories of animals that just barely avoided extinction. The first one I wanted to talk about is the black-footed ferret. For a long time, these were generally thought to be extinct, and for good reason. The colonization of America hit these ferrets like a truck. After their discovery in the early 1800s, Americans did the only natural thing and immediately started hunting them for their fur before deciding they didn't actually like it that much. Soon after that, America as a whole started converting their primary habitat, prairies and valleys, into farmland, causing them to not only lose out on precious breeding ground, but this simultaneously killed off their main prey, the prairie dog. And the whole population saw a huge decline as a result. With all of these sudden changes, a large number of black-footed ferrets had nothing to eat and nowhere to live. By 1979, the species was declared extinct, until only 2 years later, a tiny surviving population was miraculously discovered in Meeteetse, Wyoming, which eventually grew to 130 individuals, and the species has been recovering ever since. Wait, no, I forgot to mention, the entire newly discovered population caught the sylvatic plague, which is basically the bubonic plague for prairie dogs and ferrets, and over 100 of the surviving population were killed. Seeing the entire population being decimated by plague, conservationists went, "Aw, look at their little boots," and a captive breeding program was promptly started to take in the remaining 18 black-footed ferrets. As a result of these efforts, around 400 black-footed ferrets are estimated to live in the wild today, with another couple hundred being kept in captivity. So all in all, one of the more successful conservation plans. Unfortunately, not all conservation efforts go quite so smoothly, which leads quite nicely into my next and personal favorite example of this, the kakapo. They're a type of parrot native to New Zealand, commonly referred to as a moss chicken due to their coloration, and I like them so much because they seem practically designed to fail. For starters, they can't fly, and they're extremely fat, essentially turning them into a feast for anything that catches them. Lucky for the kakapo, they have long legs and can run quite quickly through even jungle terrain. Of course, they completely freeze up when threatened, making that ability obsolete, but they make up for it by only reproducing every 3 to 5 years and only laying 1 to 4 eggs when they do. Their only saving grace is that they have an extremely long lifespan and can live up to 100 years. So if they do somehow survive, they can experience watching their children get slaughtered by everything in sight. However, as one might expect, replicating the exact same strategy as the dodo isn't a recipe for success. So their numbers quickly started to dwindle around 1990. The only reason they made it this far in the first place is because New Zealand is an island country with very few natural predators. The main reason they died off is because as settlers moved into the island, they brought with them a variety of creatures such as dogs for hunting and ferrets to reduce the rabbit population. The thing is, the only predator the kakapo was used to dealing with at this point were birds of prey, and freezing up actually worked on those since they used movement to find their targets. But they had absolutely no clue how to deal with dogs or ferrets, leading to a quick population decline. I know I've been making fun of these things, but they were doing just fine for hundreds of years before humans showed up, and I guess some people saw this and felt bad at the time, because in 1891, the New Zealand government set aside one of their small islands as a nature reserve. They appointed someone named Richard Henry to catch and move kakapo and kiwi birds from the mainland to the predator-free reservation. The conservation efforts seemed to be going well, and at one point there were around 200 known kakapos on the reservation island. Until one day, a bunch of stoats swam to the island, and within 6 years the entire kakapo population on what was supposed to be a nature reserve had been completely wiped out. And you best believe the kiwis weren't doing any better. In the following years, conservationists were desperate to save the species, but were seemingly clueless how to actually help. They would essentially hear rumors of kakapos showing up in random forests, go find them, take them back for breeding, and somehow manage to get them killed each and every time. The first was in 1903 when they took them to a new island where they were promptly murdered by feral cats, before doing the exact same thing again in 1912 with practically no changes. It wasn't until 1958 and multiple other failed attempts that they finally said, okay, these are not working in the wild. Let's put them in captivity where they'll be safe so they can breed there. So 5 kakapos were taken into captivity for breeding. But apparently, nobody researched how to take care of them there because within months, 4 had died with the remaining kakapo only making it another 4 years. Keep in mind, these birds can live to be 100, so this was no divine coincidence. Finally, in the 1980s, a full century after conservation efforts were started, they were sent to an island without animals that would instantly rip them to shreds. To make up for the countless kakapo deaths on their hands, conservationists provided them with supplemental food to boost mating, protected the nests of their young, and gave each remaining kakapo a wireless transmitter so they could track their behavioral patterns and location. Unfortunately, due in no small part to the disastrous conservation efforts, at one point there were only 17 known kakapo alive, which created something called a genetic bottleneck, which means the population was so low these things had to inbreed to survive, and as a result a whopping 61% of kakapo eggs are too genetically scrambled to hatch. Remember, they only lay 1 to 4 eggs every few years, so this is a huge blow to the species that could continue to affect them for centuries. Despite this, conservation efforts have somehow been a success, and the kakapo population has risen to around 260 individuals as of 2023. Granted, this is around the same population size that was wiped out in only 6 years by stoats, but let's call it a win. Not all conservation efforts end up as a success though. Scientists have tried some pretty strange strategies in order to preserve certain species. In 2003, scientists used skin from the extinct Pyrenean ibex to create a clone in an attempt to revive the species. The clone died after only a few minutes due to lung defects, but it's still a wild story. Another strategy that was surprisingly effective was used on the California condor. These birds were almost certainly going to go extinct in the 1980s due to loss of habitat and poaching, which is why the government decided to round up literally every surviving California condor they could find and breed them in captivity. People worried that this would change their natural habitat too much and prevent reintroduction to the wild, since removing them would allow some other predator to hypothetically take their place. Considering the alternative was to let them get slaughtered in the wild, they decided to take them all in for breeding anyways. To help with the breeding process, conservationists would take care of the baby condors, and they used these goofy condor gloves to feed the birds. I'm pretty sure these are to avoid the babies from getting used to humans and expecting food from them in the wild, but imagine what the baby must think if they see someone take off the glove. In their eyes, they just see their mother get decapitated before coming back the next day like nothing ever happened. After a few generations had grown up, we reintroduced them to the wild, and we quickly learned the main predator the condor seemed to deal with, like many other animals, was just humans. As California condors had very little natural habitat left, and when they did find a place to settle down, they were getting poached left and right. The ones who didn't get poached kept accidentally feeding their babies garbage that they found thinking it was food, leading to tons of infant deaths. Despite their struggles though, California condors have made a very slow recovery and a couple hundred exist in the wild today. So, now you know a few things about animals that nearly avoided extinction. You can now forget everything I told you and come back in 2 days to learn all of it again. Thanks for watching, I'll see you lads next time.